Just remember, the stuff presented by this creepy bear is from the Evolution 101 website, written by the Understanding Evolution team. Commentary by Rent-A-Friend2000. That's me.
Homologies and analogies. Since a phylogenetic tree is a hypothesis about evolutionary relationships, we want to use characters that are reliable indicators of common ancestry to build that tree. We use homologous characters in different organisms that are similar because they were inherited from a common ancestor that also had that character.
If you'll take out your Debate for Dummies book and look up circular reasoning, you'll find homologous characters. How do we know that these two creatures are descended from a common ancestor? They have homologous features. How do we know these are homologous features and not just coincidentally similar? Because they descended from a common ancestor with that trait? But how do we know they descended from that ancestor? Because they have homologous traits. How do we know those traits are homologous? Later they will bring up what they call convergent evolution, meaning two creatures evolve a similar trait when their most recent common ancestor did not have that trait. So how do they know the homologous features from the convergences? They check the phylogenetic trees. Yes, the trees they are going to try to confirm with this data is the foundation on which the data is built. Is the room spinning yet? Again, imagine a lawyer pulling this one. We found shoe prints which were made at the time of the crime. We know these are the defendant's shoe prints at the scene of the crime, which proves he is guilty. And how do you know those are his shoe prints and not the prints of a similar shoe? We know they are his because he was there committing the crime. Therefore, those must be his shoe prints. And on CSI Darwin, that's good enough to convict a man.
An example of homologous characters is the forelimbs of tetrapods. Birds, bats, mice, and crocodiles all have forelimbs. Sharks and bony fish do not. The ancestor of tetrapods evolved forelimbs, and its descendants have inherited that feature, so the presence of forelimbs is a homology.
Translation. If you presume evolution to be true, and you presume the ancestor of all four-legged animals was itself a four-legged animal, then you can assume that forelimbs is a homology. Yet even after all of the required assumptions, these homologies will be delivered as proof of the evolution, which has to be presumed to decide these are homologies. Are you dizzy yet? We're just getting started!
Not all characters are homologies. For example, birds and bats both have wings, while mice and crocodiles do not. Does that mean that birds and bats are more closely related to one another than to mice and crocodiles? No. When we examine bird wings and bat wings closely, we see that there are some major differences. Bat wings consist of flaps of skin stretched between the bones of the fingers and arm. Bird wings consist of feathers extending all along the arm. These structural dissimilarities suggest that bird wings and bat wings were not inherited from a common ancestor with wings.
Not only did flight supposedly evolve in separate ways unrelated to a common ancestor, but the very similar radar that bats and dolphins have supposedly evolved separately and were not from a common ancestor. How do we know the radars are not homologous? We check the phylogenetic trees, but how do we build those trees? By linking species with similar traits. Chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg. Ah! One problem which instantly comes to the surface is trying to pick which similarities mean a common ancestor. Bats and dolphins having a radius and ulna, forearm bones, is homologous, even though the bat uses his in a wing and the dolphin uses his in a flipper. But the sonar systems they use to hunt food are not homologous, even though they come from similar genes. Doesn't this strike you as completely arbitrary? This is like grouping Batman with the Punisher because they both wear black, even though Batman doesn't use guns or kill anyone, and the Punisher does nothing but use guns to kill people. Right? Right? Even more problematic is the necessity to have amazingly improbable events, such as the accidental increase in genetic information to cause the development of sight or flight from an unguided accidental process happen not just once in the history of life, but multiple times. If I manage to get all four aces in one hand, it's pretty unlikely, but not impossible. But if it keeps happening, how long until you pull your six-shooter and demand to look up my sleeves?
This idea is illustrated by the phylogeny below, which is based on a large number of other characters. Bird and bat wings are analogous, that is, they have separate evolutionary origins, but are superficially similar because they have both experienced natural selection that shaped them to play a key role in flight. Analogies are the result of convergent evolution.
Here is an amazing sleight of hand. Convergent evolution. Because mice and bats are similar in their teeth and toes, we say that those teeth and toes are homologous features. Because bats and dolphins have a similar radar, but no common ancestor with that radar, according to the imaginary tree we built, then this is not an example of evolution. So how do we use this to sell evolution? We say this is evolution which is not the result of descent with modification. Another reason why the original definition failed. But the result of two different lineages creating similar, but not homologous, features. So if they had a common ancestor with that trait, it's garden variety evolution. If they don't, it's convergent evolution. As you will come to see, they've created a veritable 31 flavors of evolution, so that no matter what happens, or doesn't happen, they can label it evolution, despite thereby contradicting the original definition of evolution that was provided. In the meantime, oh look, I just dealt myself another ace! What are the odds? Unlikely, I know, but this hand is not homologous to that last hand with an ace I dealt me. It's analogous, because it's the ace of spades this time. These are convergent hands. Unguided, random chance, yep. Just put that gun down and let's play the game.
Interestingly, though bird and bat wings are analogous as wings, as forelimbs they are homologous. Birds and bats did not inherit wings from a common ancestor with wings, but they did inherit forelimbs from a common ancestor with forelimbs.
Let me clarify this. Wings, not homologous. How do we know? Because we believe the birds are dinosaurs, which are lizards, which used to be fish. Uh-oh, fish don't have legs. Okay, so we believe fish grew legs and became four-legged animals. Frogs? Which then became lizards and mammals, each of which developed flight over non-homologous pathways, which is still evolution, the convergent kind. And then evolved into birds and rodents, some of which developed flight. How do we know all this? Because, well, didn't you see that chart a few pages back? It's all on there. How did gills become lungs and a one-chambered heart become a two-chambered and then a three and then a four-chambered heart without killing the creatures? And how did lungs change from hold your breath underwater for 2 hours kind to the fly non-stop for 3 days kind? And how did egg-laying creatures become placental-like birthers? Stop asking questions and get back to work! No, we don't have the transitional creatures which the story demands 1,000 times over, but obviously they must have lived at some point because birds and lizards and rats all have a common ancestor. Do you know what happens to our phylogenetic tree if we only put in the creatures we know about? It goes away. Join us next week for more. Yee! Thanks for liking and subscribing and for sharing this on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Google+, and any other way you can. Thanks for any comments or emails you care to send. And thanks for letting me be your rental friend. Ba-da-da-dum-bum.